Hi folks, General Manager Tony Mazzucco coming to you with our weekly COVID-19 and vaccine update. We're going to get started in just a minute with some updates on our COVID-19 outreach and efforts and as well as on the vaccine. So we are going to get started in just a moment. I hope everyone's doing well and staying safe out there. I think, let's see, my shirt today is Norwood Police, so quick shout out to Norwood Police for the shirt. And as soon as we have a few people join us, we're going to go ahead and get going. Hi Captain, thank you for joining us this week and every week, and thank you for all the work that you do helping keep people safe as we continue to combat COVID-19. Hi Patty, good to see you. I'm going to announce a little bit later the library is still looking for plastic bags, so those are the little Shaw's grocery bags that we all have millions of on the in our house somewhere. The library is collecting them and you can bring them there. We will have an update about the vaccination of Norwood's first responders. And why don't I just go ahead and jump right into our numbers, which is where we can start with the COVID numbers. So we'll start with the COVID update, and then we have our vaccine update and some more information on the vaccine. So our COVID numbers in terms of community spread, unfortunately, are continuing to rise. We had hoped after a couple of weeks of flat and slight declines that maybe it would drop down a bit. Unfortunately, it has popped up a bit. Hey, Michelle, thank you for joining us. We're still continuing to see roughly the same rate over the last 4 weeks that we've seen. We think this latest bump is actually probably that true post-holiday bump that we were expecting, or at least for the New Year's bump. Our rate per 100,000 is 69. That's actually the highest it's ever been, so that's the rate of infections per 100,000 residents, which was originally what the state based their red, green, yellow, gray scale on, and then the state sort of moved the post, and I don't know if they're going to move the post again, because now most communities, I think 190 in the Commonwealth, are on red. So unfortunately, the numbers continue to go up. Our 2-week test count is 4,500, which is also good because the testing numbers still do continue to increase. And our total tests at the Norwood Hospital trailer, the number is about 3,500, so we've had that up and running since around the beginning of November. It is here at least through June, depending on where things go. We will talk about the Norwood Hospital as well, if for no other reason to the announcements are that we still have no news, but we are meeting with hospital leadership. It was supposed to be this week, it got postponed to next week. Our positivity rate is still high at 7.27%, so there were times where we were kind of happy with it being in the 2% range, maybe 3%. We're now seeing 7.27% for positivity rate in Norwood, which means that the percentage of people testing positive who live in Norwood, 7% of them who get tested test positive. The Norwood testing trailer is a little bit higher at a little over 10%. That's because you do need a doctor's note to go to the Norwood Hospital testing trailer. So it's likely that those people will be a little bit more, that the testing rate will be a little bit higher there, because you're already calling your doctor saying, gee, I think I'm sick, I may have been exposed, I have a cold. One thing that's important to note is the average age from the beginning of when we started tracking COVID metrics back in March till now is 46. The average age for the last 30 days is 41. Towards the late summer, we started to see that average age drop quite a bit, but it's important to note what was originally thought as a disease primarily affecting older individuals. The average age, at least in Norwood, of somebody who tests positive for COVID is 46. So that number continues to drop down and down. Before I go into our vaccine update, a couple quick questions. Michelle, are water lines and old meters being replaced around town? We're always doing some meter replacement. And this spring, we will begin a $4.5 million water line replacement project throughout town. We're finalizing the roads now. Meters are always being replaced. If you think you have a specific meter problem, you can always call the DPW and they can take a look at it. Sometimes it is possible for a meter, like any piece of equipment, to fail. It's always worth checking out with the DPW. Sometimes you may see specific work going on and it could be related to a particular meter being down or a particular pipe break that we have to work on. If you're noticing any pressure issues with your water, always call the DPW and let them know. They can find out whether or not there's something going on, whether there was a break somewhere. Sometimes that could be a break that nobody's yet aware of. So, our vaccine update, and I am happy to say that our COVID updates have now become COVID and vaccine updates. We did begin vaccinating first responders in Norwood this week. Some of you may have seen it on the news. There are videos we'll be posting to our website. You've probably seen them of both Chief Brooks and Chief Maurice, our police and fire chiefs, getting their vaccine. To date, we have vaccinated about 100 first responders in Norwood. So we've done 30 the first 2 days. We did about 30, about 25 Wednesday, or I think it's 20 Wednesday, and then around 20 today, and we have a few more scheduled for tomorrow. So within that 5-day period, we will have hit about 100 out of 140 of our first responders. Now, when I say our first responders, I am talking about Norwood Police and Fire. It's possible that other people who are police and fire in other towns have gotten it through their towns or through some of the mass sites that they've set up. So about 100 out of 140 by the end of this week is pretty good for a first week. We're going to be continuing our clinics. Those will be ongoing with public safety. The other thing to remember is we do have a handful of people who have gotten their vaccine that would count in sort of my 140 number. Somewhere else, a few of our public safety officials do have, or officers do have either jobs at a hospital or somewhere else. And believe it or not, a few of our folks that have been doing details up at Moderna have actually gotten it directly at Moderna because they've been working up there for different details and security and health measures that we're helping out them. So out of that 140, there's probably a half a dozen who have also gotten it somewhere else. And there's actually a few people who have been advised, you don't have to wait if you've had COVID to get the vaccine. Dr. Fauci has sort of said, 90 days, 60 days, you should be fine. So the general guidance is if you've tested positive for COVID, you should probably wait about 90 days before getting the vaccine. We do have a couple of people in that category. COVID spread among our first responders was actually incredibly rare up until this fall when numbers started to spread, and I believe all of our cases, and there were still only a handful of them, were tied to family members or some activity outside the workplace, which is a good thing. So there were a couple of people in that category where they haven't quite hit that 90-day period from when they did test positive for COVID that will be waiting. So realistically, if you factor those folks in and facts who have gotten it somewhere else, I'd say we're down to maybe 30 out of the 140 that haven't had a chance to get vaccinated yet, but we'll continue our clinics throughout the next few days. In the next weeks, what it'll likely go to is a weekly clinic going from there. Let me pull up here a little bit. So are there any questions about our initial vaccination effort? If I'll take a pause here because there's a couple of things I want to go for, but we're at about 100 out of 140. I know a few folks had written in questions. Sorry, Julie. What percentage have opted to take the vaccine? So it's, as I said, it's about 100 out of 140, 130, depending on how you want to look at it. It's free. It's an open sign up for our first responders. We do know that some folks are going to want to wait and sort of see how it works out, which I think this week has shown it's been not a problem. And you may have some cautious folks out there who are just, well, I want to wait and see how it works, or I'm not so sure about it. And I assume you'll see a little bit of that as time goes on. Thank you, Katie. It is a nice big plastic cup. I think I bought it probably at Walmart a couple hundred years ago. And it's water and a little bit of leftover lemonade. So we've also gotten the question about the vaccine as, are we going to be able to mandate it? Are we going to mandate it for first responders? Are we going to mandate it for teachers, et cetera, et cetera? It's a big question, right? I don't know to what extent something like that has been mandated before, at least in recent memory. So my response to that is we're going to wait and see, as right now we're taking sort of the carrot approach with everyone. We don't know to what extent under the law people can be ordered to get a vaccine, even if it's an employee. It's questionable. If we can do it, I think we would. And even if it were to lose at court, my recommendation would be that we do. I don't think for people in healthcare and people who are first responders and certainly educators, and this is my opinion, not necessarily the official town position, after we've gone through so much that they wouldn't get the vaccine, and then I worry about the liability of people choosing not to get a vaccine, and what if they choose to get somebody sick, or what if they get sick and now I'm getting, having to take care of them. I mean, certain numbers of vaccines have been mandatory for a while. I know when I went to, I remember trying to go to college and you had to get your list of vaccines that you had to have before I could go to Bridgewater State College. And it was, you didn't have the second shot of your MMR and you didn't have some other shot. So you went and you got them, and it is what it is. So I think that will come in time. I think you're going to see a social compliance level that's very high. I can tell you for everyone who has said that they're not sure about the vaccine, there have been plenty of people calling us saying, can we get in line? When can we take it? Or are we next? And we all have a reason why we should move to the head of the line, which it's important to understand the state has a fairly strict framework that we're following in Norwood. We've decided we are going to be rule followers and we're not going to breach the state guidelines. We don't want to lose our ability to vaccinate. We don't want it getting taken away from us. And that's hard, right? Because we have other communities that are doing it. We certainly were frustrated and that's the politically correct word to use, that first responders in a couple of other communities actually got vaccinated ahead of ours. Well, we were clearly told by the state January 12th is when it starts. So don't start before January 12th. I kind of like that. I found my desk and the camera shakes a little bit. So we said, we're going to follow the rules. We're going to be rule followers. This is important. We need to follow rules. A couple other communities seem to not follow the rules without any consequences, but we're still going to try to be rule followers here in Norwood. Right now, it's first responders getting vaccinated. I believe congregate care is next, and we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. I'll take a couple of questions before I jump into congregate care in the next phase. So will the town be involved with vaccinating adults 75 plus when we get there for phase 2? We have stated clearly through a number of associations and our direct advocacy through the health department, we want to be. If you give us the vaccine, we can vaccinate any group of people, whether it's everyone over 75. We just haven't been told whether we'll definitively be doing that yet. We've been told we'll start to get involved in some of the phases, in some of the portions of phase 2. And our goal is to do it. I would much rather, and I think it will be much easier for the state to say, okay, Norwood, how many people do you have in this category? How many do you have? I mean, we have practiced and drilled and trained on mass vaccination for decades. Decades. For decades, your taxpayer dollars at the federal level and to an extent the state level, but especially the federal level through federal emergency planning, have made us practice and practice and practice and drill on mass vaccinations. So we can do it. I can tell you our main push with the state right now is we're getting information back and forth. We keep pushing up that please let us do schools, let us do teachers, and let us know when we can do it, and we want to do it. And we're developing our internal plan to be able to get that shot when maybe 5 to 7 days to all the schools in town. That's sort of our focus, not out of line with whenever it's allowed by the state. We're not asking for anyone to be moved up or down the list. But I can tell you, if I have, we'd probably have to include St. Catherine's because you're mostly doing facilities in your community. So if you take the Norwood Public Schools plus St. Catherine's, I'd assume that's probably 500 teachers, maybe 500, 600 with support staff. If you gave us 600 doses, we can get them all done in a week. Plain and simple. You know, maybe we do an extra day for somebody who happens to, God forbid, be out sick or something like that, or they were taking a vacation day. But our push is give us the vaccine at the local level. We can distribute to anyone who you want. Congregate care settings, things like group homes, senior housing is coming up, and housing authorities, those are considered similar or quasi-congregate care settings. We know we'll be doing those or be able to do those. And for us, it's easier. When somebody tells us to do the housing authority, you give us the vaccines, we can go, we can do it, we can get it done. I'm going to go through a couple of questions here. So that, Catherine, to your question is, we haven't been told yet. We are ready and able to do it, and we will do it, and we'd be willing to do it. If they shipped 30,000 doses tomorrow, we could do the whole town. If they shipped 80,000 doses, we would do the whole town plus everyone that works here. We can do anything as long as the state gets us the doses. So Julie, your question, any talk about mandating first responders the vaccine? I mentioned that a little bit earlier. We need to wait to know that we have the legal authority to do so. If we can, my recommendation is going to be that we do. I think everyone that's working in public service has to do it. I think that includes first responders. I think that includes teachers working in a classroom. I mean, the fact that we're making kids stay home and we're not teaching them, we're teaching them. We're doing a better job in Norwood than most towns. I think it has to be. We don't know that we would have the legal authority to do that, and it's not a union issue, it's not a contractual issue, it's just the complexity of personnel law might make it tough to do that. But if we can do it, I think we need to do it. People need to get the vaccine. That includes our first responders, that includes teachers, that includes everyone. And Stack, I agree with you. I thank our first responders too, who have been dealing with this and dealing with the loss of a hospital since March, and it's weighing on them. We were so thrilled to finally be able to get the vaccine out there. Question from Katie. You talk about liability, talking about the long-term health of the first responders or the liability of a first responder opting out, then asymptomatically carrier passes it on to somebody they're helping. It is both. So there's what Katie's talking about is, I said, you know, I'd be concerned about the liability of a first responder not taking the vaccine, and really expand first responder 3 months now to a teacher, to somebody else, because right now the vaccine's not available for everyone. Once it's available, so let's say I'm a police officer, let's say I'm a teacher, let's say I'm a janitor working in a building, because Stephen, I actually think that the custodians in Norwood should get them when the teachers do. That's how hospitals do it, and that's always been our argument is these people are working in the buildings, they need to do it. The state's been very strict so far. We feel that when we get to that phase 2, we'll be able to ensure that we include the custodians and the cafeteria workers. The risk level is roughly the same. A lot of towns had a push to make sure dispatchers were included with public safety. So you think of our police dispatchers, they also do prisoner watch on occasion. So they're working with the same police officers in the same building. It'll take a little bit of time to get all the support staff, but our push is when we're ready to do the schools, it's everyone that works in the school building. Now, to Katie's point about liability, yes, I'm worried that if I have a first responder or a teacher or any town employee, once the vaccine's widely available, that they go to a home or you go to them, either that employee then gets sick, so now I pay their health insurance. Are they having to use their sick time, or am I not making them take their sick time? Because right now, under the Federal First Coronavirus Response Act, we're not making employees take sick time if they're down with COVID. And I don't want to sound like a jerk saying, oh, well, I'm going to charge them their sick time, but if you've taken the vaccine and you don't get sick, everything works out. If you've chosen not to take a vaccine and then you're out for 6 weeks because you are impacted with COVID, well, now I've got to cover your time when you've chosen not to do something. I don't think that's fair to the taxpayer. I don't think it's fair to the other employees who choose to. And you're right, the other side of that is I haven't gotten vaccinated. I happen to work with a senior citizen. I transmit to them. They know for some reason that it was me that transmitted to them, which is not always possible. Am I then liable because I could have reasonably prevented that harm? I think so. Remains to be seen. So that's why I think the more pressure the public can put on, really the state, because we'll do it if we can do it, but we don't get to make all that many laws here. We can kind of set, how long you can park in a parking space, but that's about it. The more the state and the governor hear that there needs to be a mandate for some of these positions, especially because it is actually being provided at no cost by the government. So we'll mandate it when and if we can. We're not 100% sure if we can. In my professional opinion, do I think it should be? Absolutely. What a lot of hospitals do pre-COVID is they would tell people if you don't get a flu vaccine, you got to wear a mask the entire time. And if you do get a flu vaccine, you're not going to have to wear a mask. We don't know when masks are going to go away. We'll still be wearing them for a while. But you might see some situations like that. But I don't know how if I was a teacher in a classroom and I was vaccinated, I would feel safe. Even if students haven't been vaccinated, but what happens when you have a classroom and that teacher hasn't been vaccinated? There's some risk there. And to be honest with you, today our teachers are going through that risk, right? So they're at a high risk level because they're doing it today, and God bless them for it. But that risk is always going to be there. I think that liability is going to be there. And as I said, the rollout typically for when you're picking a category of people does include everyone that sort of works in or around that facility. So when we get to phase 2, custodians and cafeteria workers should be included. That's going to be our push to include them. We haven't gotten all of the ancillary public safety staff yet, but we believe we should be able to within a week or two because they start clearly falling into that next category of phase 2. So that's the goal. And again, you may think, gee, you may hear stories about, well, a secretary in this building got it here, or my friend's a janitor at Ocean Spray and they got the vaccine and we haven't gotten it yet. There's always a little bit of different interpretation of the rules, but the goal is safety, and there'll eventually be enough vaccine out there for everyone. I know there's some discussion at the national level about the Biden administration incoming, and they want to change the rollout. I don't know if that'll necessarily impact at the state level because the state already has a plan that they're working on and that we're working through. The only concern I have is phase 2 all of a sudden starts to widen up quite a bit. So I think what you'll see is once we're ready for that real phase 2, there's probably going to be sort of many sub-steps in phase 2. We certainly don't mind if they just said, phase 2, do everyone. Sure, we'll jump and do everyone. There's still a lot of medical offices that haven't gotten word yet where they're getting it from. We're prepared here to vaccinate as many people as the state will allow us to, and as many people as we can get vaccine for. Fast forward 30 days from now, let's say it's the middle of January right now, 30 days from now we could be starting teachers in the schools, and that would be our goal, and getting a lot of other people into schools as well. Once the vaccine is much more widely available and widely out there, I think you'll see any opposition to it sort of drop away. You'll still always have a few folks who don't want to get a vaccine, and everyone's entitled to their opinion, right or wrong. But I think that social pressure will build. Because I got to tell you, I think I'm ready. I was probably ready back in April for society to get back to normal. And our behavior is an important part of that, but that rollout of the vaccine is an important part of that. For the very fact that people don't, folks, you may not understand, may not know this, but we actually have done quarantine for years. 100 years ago, it used to be a big deal. 60, 70 years ago, they used to quarantine people for diphtheria and all sorts of other things. We would still quarantine people for a hepatitis. You just generally don't hear about it because it might be one person in the town of Norwood every other year. And it's also confidential information. So we're not quarantining 50 people for, tetanus or something like that. So once the vaccine's available, you can still get quarantined by public health. So if the vaccine's available, let's fast forward to August, and you were able to get it and you chose not to, and you and I went out to lunch, and then I tested positive, they're still going to say, okay, you've been tested positive for a infectious disease. There's still going to be contact tracing. They're still going to say, where did you go? And public health is still going to issue an order that you need to quarantine to prevent the spread. So my whole thing is, I want the vaccine. I want everyone else to have it so we can go back to having lunch together. We can go back to having parties together. I keep telling everyone July, I hope it's Christmas in July. I'm sure a lot of folks would like to be out at a restaurant or a bar just jammed in there with a whole lot of people and droplets going everywhere, and we're all reasonably protected from it. Question from Joanne, would you remind people that if they have had a COVID test due to exposure? I'm not sure exactly what you mean to if they've had a COVID test due to exposure. So public health will always recommend to get a test, generally recommends getting a test if you have symptoms. If you've been exposed to somebody, you can always call your doctor and say that you think you have symptoms, and you can get a test at the Norwood Hospital, which will end up being free. When should you get tested? Always at the advice of your doctor. If your test is pending, you should not return to work or school until you have results. Joanne, absolutely. This is actually something we've seen. If you've gotten tested for COVID, you should not go anywhere until you have your test results. If it's Monday and I get tested for COVID and it takes 2 or 3 days to get the test results, if I'm infectious, I am still infectious Tuesday, I am still infectious Wednesday. You're absolutely right. Stay home. Please stay home. If you're not feeling well, stay home. And I understand that there's people who don't necessarily have that flexibility in their job, that they may actually lose the money by not going to work, and that's a hard thing. And I wish we had a different sort of benefit structure in the country that could absorb that, and I wish it was a little bit stronger. I wish it was something we could do at the local level. But Joanne, you're absolutely right. If you're waiting on your test results, you should not go to work or school or out and do social activities. Don't think, well, I'm not going to work today because I took a test yesterday, but I'm going to go out to lunch with a bunch of friends or go swimming or play basketball or something like that. That also applies to situations where if you think you've been exposed or somebody in your immediate household has been exposed, you should be equally as cautious. Now, your doctor, the public health staff, and will advise you one way or another, but let's say you're a family of 5, and little Sammy comes home and he ends up testing positive. Mom and dad should probably have that conversation with their employer, and you should call the doctor, although they might say, depending on whether you're in the the sort of first ring of people to be quarantined or not. But I can tell you, in my case, 99 times out of 100, if somebody calls me and says, Tony, I am supposed to be at work on Tuesday, I'm really needed, but my son just tested positive for COVID, I'm going to say, stay home and call me in a couple of days. Plain and simple. We're able to do that, but we just don't want it to spread anymore. I can't emphasize enough how actually high our COVID numbers are. Our testing numbers, or I should say our data numbers in April, weren't as strong as they are now, but on a pure paper basis, there's more COVID in the community today than there was in April. Now, it was likely much higher then, and we just didn't have as much testing and everything. But please, we also don't want to slowly bleed towards lower numbers. If you look at our testing numbers, and they're all available on the town's website on the health page, when the governor started the lockdowns in April, what you saw is 2 weeks of a dramatic drop in numbers, and then it flatlined for a week period, and then boom, sank down to nothing. And it took us a whole summer and then a fall to get back up to where we were. I mean, we had probably a good 6 or 8 week period there where the numbers were nothing. My fear is we're not going to feel that drop like we did. I mean, I'm sure if we went through tougher lockdowns we would, but what if it just dips a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit? Because if the numbers are between here and where they were in the summer, I don't know if we're going to have the same kind of dining and facilities and stuff that we had before. And I keep telling everyone, once the weather gets warm, I want to be able to go into restaurants again. I mean, you can still go into restaurants. We want to do the outdoor dining again, which outdoor dining is, of course, very safe, but we want people able to get together. And a lot of our businesses, some of the entertainment businesses that have suffered, movie theaters, bowling alleys, things of that nature, we want to get back to that. So I do have a fear that if we're not serious about staying home and taking this as the last, it's sort of maybe the last or the beginning of the last battle, but sometimes the last battles are the worst. if you think of the vaccine rollout coming, you know, I always like World War II analogies. Maybe it's like D-Day, right? So once the Allies landed on D-Day, if you're a history fan, you know that that was really the beginning of the end. You knew then that the war was over and Hitler was going to lose. But there were a lot of casualties between the day they landed on that beach and the day the war ended in Europe. And that's sort of where we are. There's still the potential for a lot of people to suffer and a lot of people to die between now and when the vaccine is fully rolled out. I don't want to sound that negative because we're actually vaccinating people against COVID. If you remember back to almost a year ago, before we had a mask mandate, when we were telling people make a mask out of cloth and wear it over your head, I mean, now masks are sort of the norm and they're easy. So we've come so far, we just don't want to lose a lot in that second, in between here and the vaccine. And second waves of pandemics throughout history, for whatever reason, have typically been worse, and we're seeing that. So maybe we can reverse that trend in history and make it better. And it just comes down to being safe. Stay within your own little circle. Don't go out too much. Be safe. Wash your hands. It's still important. When the pandemic ends, just a reminder, I haven't said this in a couple months, it's still going to be important to wash your hands a lot when the pandemic ends. I know we talk about it in the context of the pandemic, but it's actually just a non-pandemic thing that we should all do quite a bit. Stay home when you're sick. If you're not sure, stay home when you're sick. Get tested, call your doctor, be safe, try not to travel. I was going to try to do a trip this summer out to Seattle. I've always wanted to take a train out there. Well, stuff happens. I canceled it. I'll do it this year. So we do need people to continue staying safe. I have a number of other announcements. If anyone has any COVID or vaccine related questions, go ahead and put them in the comment box. We'll continue to go with them. That's the bulk of our COVID update. I'm going to go on to a few other important updates that we have. Library bags. We all have somewhere under our sink 1 million little plastic bags from the grocery store. I know not all of us are as green as we should be. Not all of us are using our reusable bags. We're all guilty of it. But if you have them, the Morrow Memorial Library can use them. It's what they put their books in for the for their book drop-off and their book their curbside pickup. So please, you can drop them off at the library. They're doing a great job. We'll probably have the library open soon again for indoor browsing. We're just trying to keep as many employees working from home as possible, just so that we can continue to not lose too many employees to a quarantine at once. So it's sort of you take a step back on the service to still make sure we can offer the service, rather than say, uh-oh, we had something up and now we got to close completely for a couple of days. Tomorrow's another important deadline for businesses. Massachusetts has released a sector-specific relief grant program for businesses. We'll get the information posted in the link. If you are a business or you know anyone who owns a business, please check out this grant program. There's more grant programs coming. PPP loans are opening back up. There's a lot of money out there for businesses. Kate, you're welcome. You guys are doing a great job, and we can always store. Best thing about plastic bags, they're nice and easy to store, and we can store tons of them. So by all means, continue to bring them. So we have plenty of them. Deadline for the sector-specific business relief grant program. I'm actually impressed that I was able to say that without a problem. Deadline for the sector-specific business relief grant program run by the state is tomorrow for Massachusetts businesses. I did get a question last week that we're working on from Justin about there's a ramp behind sort of Kaufman Industries near the T station, and whether or not the town could work with them to make sure that ramp sort of goes back. Some people would go up that ramp to get to the Depot Street station and take the train. We've reached out to them. They've gotten back to us. They're a great company. They're great people to work with. I have a call with them next week to sort of see if they'd be okay doing it, but it ends up being a liability issue for them. But we're working with them on it to see if we can do anything. Important update on the middle school. Tonight at 7 o'clock, there's a middle school community forum. As many of you know, the Coakley Middle School, while it might have the best middle school principal in the world in Dr. Frazek, the building has aged a little bit and not so gracefully. There's a community forum as the town is moving down the process of building a new middle school. It's a complicated process. It's a lengthy process. It's an expensive process. Once we get there, a new middle school is probably going to cost $100 million, and we'll get 40% of that back from the state, maybe 50% of that back from the state. It's just the way these things work in Massachusetts. We're more fortunate than other states in that way. But it's going to be a long road. There's a lot of work and a lot of information. Tonight at 7 o'clock, there's a community forum. I also want to let everyone know we've set up a specific website for the Coakley project. It's not completely done yet, so there's probably a couple of blank pages in there, and there's not too much information on there as we build it up. But it's newcmsproject.org. And you can go there to actually sign up for the Zoom tonight. You do need to sign up for it. So watch this. New CMS project. As I'm making all sorts of typos here as I try to do this and or live, whichever else works. But newcmsproject.org. Go there. It'll be where we put all the updates and all the information about the middle school project. There we go. Joe took care of that for me. And you can sign up for that Zoom. Just check it out. It's important. We're going to be building a $100 million middle school. Everyone needs to be aware of it. In particular, if you have kids in like first or second grade, there might be that first group that gets in there. Question from Megan. Do you know how quickly the decision, if it will be a 5th or 6th grade or target time frame? That actual decision is probably not, I'd say at least 6 months, if not a little bit longer. It's going to come as part of the educational process, but it's not going to be a quick just run and do it, because that's going to have a big decision on the size and the scope of the building. We've just selected the site, and the site's going to be the existing site. It met all the criteria, so it won't be an immediate decision, but maybe in the next 6 months they'll know. There's a lot that the school committee has to go through. They have to come up with recommendations. The MSBA would have to approve it. And what Megan's talking about, just for anyone who may not be following the project as closely, currently the Coakley's a 6th through 8 school. Part of the discussion of designing a new middle school is whether or not to make it a 5 through 8 school. And there's some pluses and minuses there. One of the pluses would be, certainly would help alleviate a space issue we have at the elementary school, which will be critical. It's going to be a while before financially we can address any new middle schools. We're doing one middle school this century and that's it. Any new elementary schools. It might let us rearrange the district in a way to better district and have some more space in all the buildings. But some parents obviously will have concerns about 5th graders being in a school with 8th graders. Usually the model that's out there is you kind of develop it as like 2 schools within a school. So you've got somewhat your younger kids, somewhat your older kids. Middle school ends up being a tough age for kids. Oftentimes people don't have fond memories of middle school. I don't know why, but if you think about it, a student might spend currently 5 years at the Oldham or the Balch, and then they're at the Coakley for 3, and then they're in high school. And you know, that's not a bad thing necessarily, but I'm sure anyone who's in education could explain it better than I am, but there's probably some benefit to the kids having a little bit longer and a little bit more structure at such a difficult time. That being said, I remember being in 8th grade, I remember being in 5th grade. It's certainly a discussion worth having, but it'll be a good discussion. I mean, either way, there's no bad decision, right? Some people will feel comfortable this way, some people will feel comfortable that way. It makes looking at it as the town manager, finance and capacity and all that, but there's an educational component too, and I'm going to rely heavily on certainly Dr. Frazek and Dr. Thompson to advise the community on really what's best for the students and what's best for the kids, and then we got to take into the context of what we can actually build and afford and try to look down the road, since school projects are generally something you can only do one every 15, 20 years, given the enormous cost of building a school in Massachusetts. But that's a great question, Megan. Continue to follow that website for updates, newcmsproject.org. And thank you, Deborah, for all you do on the Cultural Council and for dropping off bags at the library. I know they do appreciate it. So 7 o'clock tonight for the new middle school, for the middle school forum. It won't be the last one. There'll be plenty of community forums and an opportunity to participate and let your voice be heard and let everyone know exactly where we're going with, where you think we should go with the new middle school project. Town meeting. Some important updates on town meeting. Town meeting will be virtual. It will be February 4th. Town meeting members, please get your email addresses into the town clerk if you haven't. Particular thanks to Julie Barbara Iso, who had posted a message on, I think, Friends in Norwood Schools, asking people to send their email addresses into the town clerk. We got quite a few email addresses from that. We actually got a lot of email addresses from people who weren't town meeting members, which is a good thing. It means people were paying attention. So thank you, Julie, for that. Town meeting members, please get your email address into the town clerk's office. You'll need to get an email address in to be able to participate in town meeting. If you are a town meeting member who, for some reason, you have absolutely no access to a computer or the internet, email the clerk's office or the manager's office, and we will work with you. You will be able to access town meeting as a town meeting member one way or another. Just email us if you need that accommodation. We can take care of you. There are 4 Zoom training sessions for town meeting members, 4 of them. You'll have to register for them. Town meeting members have gotten a email with all those items on there. If you haven't gotten the email but you need it, call the clerk's office. We will be getting it out in hard copy, but anyone who's jumped on a Zoom or GoToMeeting knows if you're trying to type it in manually, there's oftentimes a lot of numbers and letters there. Residents will be able to watch town meeting just like normal. It'll be available on Norwood Community Media. They're always a great community partner. Norwood Community Media is the best public access group in the country. You'll be able to watch it normally as you would through Norwood Community Media. There'll probably be some webcasts there as well. And the 28th of January, there's going to be a town meeting information session. So next week we'll probably, the end of next week, we'll release the videos that we normally do. There'll be like a land use video and sort of a general government articles video, so you can watch those ahead of time. And then on the 28th, there will be a sort of live Zoom that'll be a Q&A. We'll go through the warrant quickly, and it'll give you a chance to ask myself and Paul Helkiotis and a couple of the other department managers that have articles on there, just questions about what's on there. And that's for town meeting members and non-town meeting members. I specifically recommend town meeting members attend. The more questions you can get asked ahead of time, the more we can try to look into it. Great question from Colin about having the transfer station open at least one Friday a month. I can't make it on Saturdays. So we've, in the past when the town's experimented with trying to do it at a different time, we haven't really seen an increase in the number of people using it. But the idea of one Friday a month is not a bad idea. We might be able to do that. I'm going to write that down because that's a really good idea. The one day a month. The dump is so popular on Saturdays that if we did it once a month, it might be like the most popular night of the month, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Doris, is there a legal or logistical reason the town clerk's office can't scan and email nomination forms? Yes, they are required to mail it. That nomination form itself is a legal document. You cannot use facsimiles of it. They would fill it out and they will mail it to you. It is an actual document. We do know that COVID has made a lot of things change, but the nomination forms are not, they are actual legal documents. They bear legal signatures. The town clerk actually tracks them and knows when they go out and everything else. So yes, they will mail it out to you. If you have to pick it up at town hall, even though town hall's closed, that could be arranged, but the easiest thing is it can get sent in the mail to you. We've been able to get that successfully for a lot of people. So yeah, Colin, we'll definitely look at it. That's actually not a bad idea. We looked at like Wednesdays, but maybe Fridays would be better. We should probably just do a poll because everyone has a different, I think, oh, nobody will go on a Friday, but then I don't actually ever do anything on a Friday night, so I'd probably go on a Friday. And I'll be honest with you, I usually work most Saturdays, so I'm actually never able to get there on a Saturday. So the amount of cardboard that is building up on my front porch is starting to be a little bit concerning. I could probably build a pretty mean cardboard fort with how much I'm building up, thanks to Amazon. So anyway, as I said, town meeting, there'll be an information session on the 28th. There are 4 training sessions for town meeting members. Nomination papers for town meeting are available. If you're interested in getting involved in town government or knowing a little bit more about what goes on, I always recommend joining town meeting. There's usually an open seat, or there's not too much competition for the 10 seats in the district. There might be 13 or 14 people. Town meeting is not as heavy of a lift as certain other boards and committees. It can be as little as 5 or 6 nights a week plus whatever time you, 5 or 6 nights a year, plus whatever amount of time you want to spend learning and following the issues. So town meeting is always great for everyone to get involved in. I highly, highly recommend it. Let me run through my updates here. We talked about COVID, we talked about the library, vaccines, we talked about the sector-specific business relief grant program. We've talked about town meeting, the 4 training sessions. Town meeting will be February 4th. And we've talked about the ramp behind Kaufman Industries and the middle school project. One other item I'll just talk about at, great question here, 2 great questions. How does one go about disposing of an air conditioner? Are there stickers for that? I would call, but since you're here, no worries. It's usually just an appliance sticker. You can call the treasurer's office and they'll make arrangements for you to be able to get a sticker, and then the sticker has the instructions. You call the number on the back and then it gets picked up. I have 2 stickers at my house and 2 things I was supposed to get rid of. They're also on my front porch. I'm just a little behind on that. So yes, and Val, somebody had asked last week, what we're working on, it'll probably take till somewhat in the post-COVID era, is trying to make those stickers eventually available at some stores in town. That way, instead of having to call town hall, having to go to town hall, because that's always not convenient. Even when town hall's open like it normally is, the building's open 8 to 4. So if you're working 8 to 4 at your job, you're not always able to get in there. We'd like to see if we can make them available at some of the grocery stores or even maybe some of the convenience stores in town. So that way, if you need one, we can say, hey, look, here's a couple of places to go to, and they're basically there 7 days a week. But yep, just call the treasurer's office and say you need a sticker. Can you mail one out? They'll take care of it. You can also call the manager's office and they'll figure out how to get it taken care of for you. And I missed a question here. Update on the coyote influx. Yes and no. So yes, coyotes are all around town. Not all around town. There are a lot of coyotes out there. We've been working back and forth with the state, and we've gotten some information from them. We continue to look into whether we can do any trapping, and they say generally no, and then if you could, it would only make it worse. Apparently, my understanding from animal control is even if we removed a couple coyotes from an area, that area, all of a sudden becomes open, and then a bunch of other coyotes want to come in and take it because it's sort of open area. They sense each other's urine, and it becomes sort of new territory. So sometimes removing some from an area actually makes the problem worse. Our coyotes, we're going to be doing like a sort of a video information session on coyotes that the health department's putting together, and just some of the safety tips that you should do. One of the big things with coyotes is whatever you do, don't feed them. Believe it or not, some people actually feed the coyotes. They're better adapted to a suburban environment because we actually are fairly safe, and there's lots of little animals. They do eat little animals, and that does include cats and stuff like that. But some people actually feed them, and the more you feed them, the more they're going to come, the more they're going to get used to it, and the more you feed them, the less afraid they are of humans. We actually want them to be afraid of humans. By their nature, they are afraid of humans. Loud noise, banging a pot, making a lot of noise, generally they'll get skittish and they'll run away. But when you feed them, what happens is they start to have less of a fear of humans. They're more used to coming closer to us. So it's important that you don't feed coyotes. It's really, really important. And the health department's going to have their little backed up, not backed up, but they're focusing on vaccine rollout. But we're going to be doing some short videos and information sessions, and like a little interview with Henry, our animal control officer, on what to do and how to help the problem, and what we can do. Katie mentions that Progress Norwood will be doing a bulk order of rain barrels for distribution the week of Earth Day. Keep an eye out for ordering forms around March. Rain barrels are always a great idea. And Doug mentions a number of cities and towns have community refrigerators that people in the midst of food insecurity can access. Is this something that will be allowed in Norwood? We'd have to take a look at it. If you think about the idea of putting an actual fridge somewhere, I wonder if that would be, would probably be better for a more denser or more urban community where more people will be able to access it. You got to think about where we would place them. We've done quite a bit with food insecurity. The food pantry is always open, the Episcopal Pantry on Saturdays. We've worked with them. We're actually going to be providing them. They have plenty of resources. We're going to be providing them some assistance to offset the cost of some folks who struggle to get there. We've run the Mustang Pantry, as well as a couple of the other projects that we've done, things specific for seniors, the Weekly Family Meals Program, and a couple of other things related to food security. Most of the communities in our area haven't gone above what they ordinarily do, but we did. But I'll take a look at that article and see if there's something that we can do. Somebody in town, I think, did it over the summer where they'd sort of left out some food in a couple of places that was sort of a free come and take it type of thing. The challenge you do somewhat see in a community like Norwood is, let's say I lived on Railroad Ave and I did that, and I need help, but I live on Dean Street. The likelihood that you can sort of get from that one end of town to the other is tough. Or I live on Albemarle Road and I want to do it, and that's great, and you put something out there, and then you need help. You live on Railroad Ave. You're not really going to be able to get there unless you're driving, which some people can. But I'll definitely take a look at that. We are always doing something with food security. And is there a town policy for employees who participate in the insurrection? Were there any? Well, there's no formal policy. Most of our job descriptions generally contain language about your conduct as an employee. Usually the higher the position administratively, the higher it is on the org chart, it's a much bigger deal. So for instance, if I were to be down there, the board would have every reason to fire me. My contract and my job description has all sorts of provisions about that. Somebody that's in an entry-level position would be a little bit tougher. Just based on public employees in Massachusetts have a property right in their job. So to deny that property right, you have to have a process that you have to go through. So it's a little bit challenging. I know that none of our police officers were down there. We're not so big that we can't generally tell when people are out of the office. So to my knowledge, none of our employees were in Washington. I don't know if there were any residents that were down there. I know that they're popping up. There seem to be people from here and there. I know Natick had a town meeting member who was down there, and they're now putting forward a petition to remove that town meeting member, but Natick apparently doesn't have, and I don't think most towns do, a mechanism to remove a town meeting member. So while there's not a formal policy, it's certainly not something we would look favorably on. And to my knowledge, none of our public safety employees were down there. I know that Police Chief Brooks has said specifically he knows none of his officers were down there. So good question, but remains to be seen. There are more people being identified at any time. It's funny, to be able to go down and participate in something like that, you either need to not necessarily be working or have a good enough job that you have plenty of vacation time to take. Is the DPW still able to provide or plant free trees and tree grass outside people's homes? I will reach out to them. By tree grass, do you mean the median strip, Katie? I know we're replacing a lot of the apple trees at the orchard that didn't necessarily survive. We're going to pick a different brand. They're not brands. We're going to pick a different genus or whatever to make them survive a little bit. And I know we're working with some community partners to plant some cedar trees this spring. We're working with the Lebanese community in town to plant some cedar trees to sort of symbolize the relationship between the Lebanese diaspora and the large Lebanese community here in Norwood. And that's being worked on by a couple of selectmen and myself and Doug Zeekheim at the skating club. The trees between the sidewalk and the street. I'll find out from the DPW. It's I would put more trees there if I could, but sometimes they end up breaking up the road. But we can have the DPW. Let me put that down. Can DPW plant trees? I always think more trees in the median and more trees in the strip are a great idea. But that's a good suggestion, Katie. I'll find out if they're still able to do that. They, like a lot of departments, are a little backed up. COVID, if nothing else, just makes everything take 15 times as long as it normally does. But the DPW has also worked the entire time of this pandemic. Some towns were able to let their DPWs go to split shifts and take them out of work completely for periods of time, and we've just never been able to do it. The trees that generally, Katie, if it's damaged during the winter, we usually wait till better tidings to end up planting them, because one of the things that actually can kill trees in sort of an urban downtown area is the salt from trucks and everything, and the salt that people put on the sidewalk. So if something goes down today, we're not replanting it till the spring. But we definitely want to. I know we've worked with it was actually Debbie Homewood's suggestion on the Capital Outlay Committee. We're going to find somewhere, and we'll probably just do it where we have excess land, but we bought, I think, 15 vehicles this year as part of our routine fleet replacement plan. So the goal is to plant 15 trees somewhere, and every year as we buy vehicles, to plant the tree for every vehicle we replace. We may at some point run out of space to plant trees, so we'd have to dig up some asphalt and create a few more farms. So you're down to 2 trees on your street, and I think, all right, I know which street that is. We'll take a look at that, Katie, and see what we can do. More trees, the merrier. Doris, we lost another one across my house. Most of it, there's a 4-foot portion still sticking out of the ground. Okay, we'll take a look at it. Remember, it's almost impossible to do these things in the winter, and I know we've got this sort of January thaw going on where it's kind of cold, but it's not too bad, and there's no snow on the ground after having that December storm. But still, even if we had trees, right now is not the best time in the world to try to plant them. One-to-one program, not a bad idea. All right, so we will look into trees. If one comes down, they replace. We generally do. It's just a matter of we don't always replace it where it was, but we'll continue to do that, to work on the one-for-one and our vehicle replacement program, our vehicle for tree program, and we will continue. I'll look into your street specifically. And Doris, I know where you live. I will have them specifically look at. Let me make note of that street, Norwood Street. I got an email from Mark about trees today. And since you're mentioning trees, check out the Norwood High School Student Initiative Treeplenish Events .org/Norwood. Great project being worked on by one of our Norwood High students, and I believe it's the probably the EYC, the Environmental Youth Club. All right, that is my list for today. If anyone has any questions, I know the hospital did come up. We're meeting with hospital leadership next week, because the answer we continue to get from them is they're waiting on insurance information, and their insurer is not being very cooperative, I guess is the way I would describe it, although those are my words, certainly not Stewart's words. They continue to communicate with us. They're trying to do a vaccination clinic out of Westwood to have some additional vaccination capacity, but we don't know too much about that yet. And they continue to operate the trailer. So as soon as we have more on that, we'll bring it to everyone. But we keep just getting the status quo, nothing's changed, which is equally frustrating for us, as I'm sure it is for every resident in town who's lost access to the hospital and the ER, and our police and fire just going gangbusters. And yes, I did forget about the recreation department. I'm sorry, I never forget about the recreation department. They have a new flip book for their programming. It's a digital programming book. Absolutely incredible. You should check it out. We'll post the link in there. They did a great job with this digital flip book. They've also done a great job with, we have a, I don't know if we have any spots left yet, but we had to run a daycare, if you will, or remote, not a daycare, it's a wrong word, remote learning enrichment academy, or whatever it happens to be, for a lot of our employees, because the schools couldn't really accommodate allowing teachers to have their kids in the classroom. Again, with our elementary schools, they're wonderful, they're cute, they're great schools, they're great neighborhood schools. They don't have a lot of space. So we had to open it up for employees to make sure they could come to work, and we had space, and we've been able to open it to some members of the public. Never, not a program the rec department had done, and they had it up and running within a couple of weeks, and they've done a great job with it. And check out their flip book. It's pretty impressive. You can always leave questions in the comments, and you can always email us at managers@norwoodma.gov. Regulations regarding residential sidewalk shoveling. The town takes care of some sidewalks. You should shovel the sidewalk in front of your house if you're able to, and you should always shovel out any fire hydrants that are near you. I'd have to check if we have a specific bylaw about the requirement to do so. You cannot throw snow in a public way, so that means you can't shovel it out into the street, and you know, we know when people do it. But what that also means is you shouldn't pile the snow from your driveway into the sidewalk. In the sidewalks that the town does not plow, I'd have to double check, Frank, I'll get back to you if there's a requirement, but it's always recommended to do it if you can. We can't plow every sidewalk, residential sidewalk plowing. But shoot us an email, Frank, and we'll get back to you on that. And Frank, while you mentioned, I know early in the year you would email us about some masks that have a clear face space that so anyone who's hard of hearing could read lips. We were able to finally get a few of them. It was a little bit of a procurement challenge, but we have them in stock if the schools need them or if we needed them in town. So that was a great suggestion. We were able to, we struggled and we got like 4 of them, and then we tried to order a couple more just to have some spares, and we were told that they were out. But that was a great suggestion earlier in the year, and we did take care of that. Norwood Food Service is still doing grab-and-go meals at the high school in Balch, breakfast and lunch, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11 to 8, ages 18 and under. Great point, Diane. Diane, one of our great food service workers. If you have kids in school and you live in Norwood, you can get lunch. We've started providing lunches to St. Catherine's. It is free. It does not take lunch away from anyone. So if your kids are doing anything, you know, whether they're remote learning or learning from home, get lunch. It helps out the cafeteria. It helps out the town. They federal government pays for it. It's a great program. And looks like a little bit of a spam comment there, so we'll yeah, we'll probably delete that there. Give me 1 second. But great. Oh, there we go. Joe already took care of it. So yes, thank you, Diane, and thank you to all of our food service workers who, once again, every single day of this pandemic have worked. With that, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. I hope you stay safe. I hope you take a little time off this weekend with the holiday, but also maybe think about doing a little service, and maybe we can all reflect on the legacy of Dr. King as we celebrate Martin Luther King Day and what that means for where America is and where we all want to go. I want to thank you all for joining us and joining us every week. We'll continue to bring you updates. You can always post questions here in the comments or email us at managers@norwoodma.gov. And those of you who did have some questions, we will get back to you on some of those answers. Thank you, Doris, and thank you all of us for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.